Hi, everybody, and welcome to Community Conversations. My name is Courtney Shaw, and I'm the facilitator of the series. I wanted to announce that next week we have a very exciting presentation. We have Angie and Mark Agaba Gaither and Dana and Brian Cummings, and they're going to be presenting on race in a global perspective, looking at their experiences, particularly in Uganda and Lesotho. So please join us again next Thursday at 12 noon, same bat time, same bat channel. And we are going to also be getting set and planning our fall series. And our fall series is going to be looking at across the lifespan. So looking at topics from birth to death and everything in between. So we'll have more information about that on our website once we get that hammered out. And remember, we will be on hiatus during the summer. But today, I'm very pleased to welcome members of the Kent Chamber of Commerce. We have with us Zenobia Harris, D'Angelo Carter, and Suzanne Cameron, who will be presenting on implicit bias. So please welcome our guests.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Courtney, for that introduction. I am Zenobia Harris, and I'm the CEO for the Kent Chamber of Commerce. And I'm so excited to have special guests with me here today, D'Angelo Carter with Northwest Industrial Staffing, who is also our Kent Chamber Board President-elect, and then Suzanne Cameron, who is with Around the Clock Inc., and she is also on our board. So I'm so thankful to these two for joining us today. I'll tell you a little bit more about them as we get into our presentation. Today, our presentation is really just an introduction to implicit bias. Okay. So next, let me tell you a little bit about who I am. Typically, especially in an online setting, I don't really like to give an introduction because if I don't preface it with this, which is do not allow my accolades or my position kind of color how you feel I'm going to approach this conversation. And I say that with the best intentions, but I do want you to know that most people, when I begin to talk about the things that I've accomplished, my title, what I do for a living, they start to color like, oh, this is why, Zenobia is here talking with us today. And it's not really that. It's really just so you can find out a little about who I am. And I'll go over more of that. So in addition to being the CEO for the Kent Chamber of Commerce, I'm actually the first African-American to lead the Kent Chamber in its 70 plus years. And that makes a lot of sense. And I'm excited to have that position because if you don't know much about the city of Kent, we are the 6th largest city in the state of Washington. We are the 3rd largest city in King County, and we are ranked 8th most ethnically diverse in the nation. And so what that means is I am a representation of the community in which I serve, and I am the spokesperson. And so I appreciate that. In addition to my role here at the Chamber, I am the Chief Executive Officer and lead facilitator for Zenobia Harris LLC, which is my consulting firm where I typically speak with higher education institutions and mid-sized businesses. And I like to say, you work with Zenobia Harris, it's where trusted messaging meets practical application. During this presentation on Introduction to Bias, you are not going to hear a lot about statistics. You are not going to see a lot of slides on demographics because the case is that implicit bias exists. Racist exists. Those are two different things. And there are systemic barriers that hold people back. And part of that and the root of that comes from implicit bias. And of course, we'll go into that a little bit more. In addition to my roles that I do on a daily basis, I'm also a certified diversity professional. I have a master's degree in public administration, a bachelor's degree in business management. I'm a real estate broker. I'm also an author. And I always like to tell the story that I've taken this road from telemarketer to CEO. And so with that being said, we'll go into our speakers, our guest speakers today, and I'll let them give a quick introduction of themselves. But in addition to me, I think it's very important that we have a conversation with people who have experience in the real world. And in that real world, some of the things that they have experienced, whether that's personally or professional or industry. Before we get into those stories, Suzanne and D'Angelo, there'll be another time later today where you actually will tell the stories. This is just your opportunity. I want you to introduce yourself, your organization, what do you do? And then later in the presentation, we'll get into your actual stories. So we'll go with you, Suzanne.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Cameron. I'm the president and designated broker for Around the Clock Inc. We're a full service real estate company and specialize in management and we serve South King County and North Pierce County. And we've had the company here in Kent now for over 30 years.
My name is D'Angelo Carter. I am the sales manager of Northwest Industrial Staffing. We are located in the center of Kent, right across from the Kent Transit Station. We've been located in that area since 2012, and I've been a part of that organization for 6 years. I work with the owners hand in hand. The owner of Northwest Industrial Staffing is Ms. Galen Martin, and I also work with her husband, which is the owner of Island Soul Restaurant, which is located in South Seattle.
Awesome. Thank you. You guys just hold on until you hear these stories that we're kind of going to go over later. And so thank you so much for that, D'Angelo and Suzanne, and welcome to this presentation today. The next thing I want to talk about is just kind of this baseline, right? We're just going to create this baseline. I talked about it a little bit for essentially I'm not here to give you a lot of statistics. At the end of the day, we all know that bias exists. And so my job today is really just to explain to you, why is Zenobia having this conversation with you? Also going to define implicit bias with your help. We'll talk about the cause and effect. We'll do like a bias exercise, and then we'll walk away, or you'll be able to walk away today with some action items and some basic understanding of implicit bias. So why me? It wasn't because of the slide that you saw before, where you're like, oh, well, she's a diversity professional, and she has a master's degree, and she's worked her way up from telemarketing to CEO. The fact of the matter, the reason why I'm here talking to you today is because bias is what has propelled me to be who I am today. If you have a pen and paper, I'll give you a second, because there'll be a couple of words that you will have to do some research if you don't know what they are. And one of those words is a oh, geez, I just drew a blank. It'll come to me. But anyway, so I am here today because I'm a trusted messenger, and folks have microaggressed against me. I have this great little 15 spiel where I talk about 10 before 10, and it just means I get microaggressed 10 times before 10 a.m. in the morning. So by 11 o'clock and you ask me to touch my hair, I'm already hyped up and hot. Like, why are you asking me that? And that's because microaggressions come in these very small, cute packages throughout the day. And so, again, if you guys, and I hope, Courtney, that's a session that you guys will do where you talk about micro and macro aggressions, because I think it happens so often and it's so little. Just imagine just these little minor cuts of something, or you're saying something to someone that's creating these little minor cuts. Doesn't hurt right then, but the more you get, the more it hurts. And so, and the word that I was going to tell you, I am an imposter, and there's something called imposter syndrome. And so I have imposter syndrome. So essentially, every time someone asks me to speak, and Courtney can attest to this, I always say, are you sure? Why are you asking me to speak? I get confused. Like, what do you want to hear what I have to say? Because I have this kind of very different way of telling this implicit bias story. And so I have this imposter syndrome, and it's really due to, because I've been in rooms where people thought it would be okay to ask me, why are you here, Zenobia? Or I'm in a room with my colleagues and they say, oh, Zenobia, do you know what time the food is coming out? Is there any way you can clean off the table? And I think, wow, I'm here experiencing this with you as a colleague, but you're treating me as if I am service, as if I'm staff, right? And so those are the reasons why I'm here today. I have real world experience with bias on a daily basis, and I've been able to figure out through my education how to tell this story and help you move through some of your biases. So in my former life, I was a teacher, and I've always wanted to be a teacher. I just don't have the wherewithal to actually do it, because I would like to do like elementary school. But anywho, so this is my chance to kind of get you guys and allow me to be a teacher. In the chat box, and I can see the chat box here, I'm going to be asking you a few questions, and these questions I want you to answer. There is no such thing as a bad answer. If you don't know, you can always say you don't know. So my question to you is, what is implicit bias? What do you think implicit bias is? And Courtney, I don't know, can they go into the chat, or is that just us, or do they need to put that in Q&A?
Everybody can go in the chat.
Okay. Okay. So I don't see anyone putting anything into chat. Do you think implicit bias is a thank you, judgments without making or without being aware of it? Great. Making an assumption? Awesome. Anything else? What do you think implicit bias? I'd like to tell people to separate the two. Do you know what implicit is? And then bias, something we all have. Thank you, Abby. Abby's going to be doing the presentation with me next time. Yes, something we all have. Great. And that's exactly it. And so I'll give you the Webster Dictionary of implicit bias. And so implicit bias refers to the brain's automatic, instant association of stereotypes or attitudes toward particular groups without conscious awareness. And so again, I will read that again. Implicit bias refers to the brain's automatic and instant association of stereotypes toward particular groups without our conscious awareness. Now, there's a lot going on in this sentence. And so I highlighted some of the things that I think are important. Automatic, they're instant, their stereotypes, and their attitude. So kind of how you treat people based on what you believe you know about them. That is a bias, not necessarily knowing who they are. And so I always like to tell this story. When I am driving and I see a sticker that says student driver, I instantly am like, I got to get off the road. I don't want to be by this person. I have never been hit by someone who is a student driver. I've never seen them do anything wrong. If you ask me, they're probably the best drivers on the road, but I still have this bias when you put student in front of driver because I just think that you're learning and you might make a mistake, right? And so that's a bias. Doesn't hurt me, doesn't hurt them, but that's really how it shows up. Yes, Sean, it's subconsciously applying assumptions about people without realizing it. It's exactly what it is. And so next, how do we develop bias? So I'm going to ask you a total of, I think, 3 or 4 questions. They're just going to get harder and harder. How do we develop bias? And again, this is something, indulge me, I'm a Gen X, so I thrive on feedback and communication. So through the language that we hear, yes. Society teaches us, yes, you can remove that question mark because that's exactly right. Our family, our media, culture, upbringing, family, right? Awesome, these are all true. So do you know someone who is biased? Yes, we're born. We are born with some predisposition to bias. We are all biased. Yes, awesome. Have you told them they are biased? Good for you. Sometimes. I'd love to explore that sometimes. Yes. And are you biased? Yes. If I had time, I would be typing yes, 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 yes. I am biased and I'm okay with that because the thing with diversity, equity, and inclusion is it really starts from within. So once you know that you're biased, now you have the opportunity to not make these rash decisions, right? You have the opportunity to, make better decisions. So for me, even when I'm going into a situation, let's say a speaking situation, and we were all in person, right? The first thing I would do is I would look for a Black woman to lock eyes with. And that's a very biased thing for me to do. But honestly, that bias to me keeps me safe. Doesn't always work out, in my benefit all the time, because just because she's Black and she's a woman and we lock eyes doesn't mean that we're going to have this like instant connection, right? But that's a bias that I have. It's a comfort. And that's really what implicit bias is. You do what makes you comfortable, and you know what makes you comfortable based on the experiences that you had. The interesting thing is that in biases, and I'll go into the definition here, that it could be someone else's experience. It doesn't really have to be your experience. It could be someone else's. So after all of those questions, let me just read how you obtain or how you get or how you live within your implicit bias. So implicit biases are influenced by experiences. Although these attitudes may not be a result of direct personal experience, cultural conditioning, media portrayals, and upbringing can all contribute to implicit associations that people form about members of social groups. So again, it doesn't have to be something that you have experienced, but you see all the time, right? And it could just be your upbringing. It could be if your parents or your grandparents use certain words, then you want to use those certain words because that's how you were brought up. Doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you uneducated to how that affects someone else. So, inclusion, and I'm going to use a lot of words here. So that might be diversity, equity, inclusion might be something that you may want to look up as well. It's not one word. It's not an acronym. They're just three separate words that this world of ours, this community that we live in, like to kind of lump together. And I'll say this quickly. You can be diverse and not equitable. You can be equitable, but not diverse. You can be inclusive, but not diverse. And really what that means is you can have a room full of the same people making the decision that doesn't really make you diverse, but everyone gets a voice, right? Or let's say everyone doesn't have a voice, but your room is so diverse. You have multi-generational people, you have different ethnicities, but only a certain subset of those people have a voice, right? So DEI is not one thing, it's three separate things. So just wanted to keep that in mind. And again, I'll make this point. The peculiar thing about biases is they can have a positive effect or they can also have a negative effect. And so a positive effect would be if I'm going to the grocery store, right? And I have two ways to get to my car. I can go left or I can go right, and it's dark outside. If I look to the right, I just see a group of people having a conversation, maybe smoking a cigarette. And then I look to my left, no one's smoking. I can still get to my car, no big deal. My bias is going to tell me, why would I cross a group of people when I can just take the safe route, right? So keeping in mind that you don't want to just dismiss all of your biases because they actually keep you safe. And so it's only when you're using that bias to make a decision that is really going to affect someone else. And it's not really about safety. It's not really about safety. I'm going to get to your question there, Sean. So I just wanted to make that. So now, what does it mean or what does it look like, and what does bias look like on an everyday basis? I have this little video that I'm going to play, and it's what I like about this video. It's about 5 years old. It's 4 minutes long. But what I like about the video is that it kind of flips bias on its head. And it's not what we see on a normal day-to-day basis. But when they use it in this context, it really brings it home for some people. So hopefully I can, nope, it doesn't like it. I'm going to maybe have Courtney pull that up. I'm going to have Courtney pull that up and we'll play it after we play our game. And Courtney, where it just says addressing unconscious bias in YouTube, you literally type it in just that way. And as we're playing our game, and it should be 4 minutes and 59 seconds and the background would be blue. That would be the way to know you have the right video.
Okay, I'll see if I can get that.
Yeah, if you just Google it. All righty, so we'll keep going so I don't hold you, and it's a pretty deep topic, right? So there's a couple of things I want to get to. Again, please indulge me. This is, before we start this exercise, what I want you to know is I am trying to force you to make a decision that I hope in the real world you would never make this fast. But really, it's going to give you the opportunity to exercise your bias without being judged. And I want you to just be honest about what those questions are, okay? So you're going to have an option of 1, 2, 3, or 4. And then there's going to be either a title, there's going to be something at the bottom of the screen. And your choice is to decide in the chat, is it number 1, 2, 3, or 4? Okay. So we're going to go here. Who here is the single parent? Oh, why is this so big? You guys can't see the second word. Who's the single parent? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Number 2, 1. Single parent. 3, 1, 1. You guys are being very safe. I appreciate that. 1, 3. Awesome. Okay. Who is the CEO? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Three, 4. See what happens when you see someone that looks like he speaks like you? We got a number 4. I normally never get a 4. 2, 4. What else? Awesome. Who in these pictures grew up in the ghetto? 1, 2, 3, or 4? 2, 4, 1, 2, 4. So a mixture. No number 3s. Oh, we got a 3. Okay, awesome. Who is the doctor? Who has a PhD? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Okay. Mixture all over the place. Who's the bad driver? 3, 4, 3, 1, 3. Okay. 1. Awesome. Who are you going to hire as your receptionist? 3, 4, 4, 1s, 4. Okay. Just want to recognize that there were no 2s there, which is fine. Just calling that out so we're all aware. Who's always late to work? 3, 4, 2, 3. 3, 4, 2. Thank you. Okay. Just recognize again, there were no 1s. And who fits into the culture at your office? 2, 2, 4, 4. Okay, lots of 2s, 4s, 1, 3. Okay. Number 1, recognize there were no 2s. And this is the last one. You walk into a meeting, who do you speak to first? 4. Hi, Sean, we did speak first. 4. Awesome. Everyone's talking to 4. I'm so excited to ask why. Awesome. 1. All 1s and 4s really for who you're speaking to first. Okay, so that was the last one. And again, I'm just going to go over that, that definition. An implicit bias refers to the brain's automatic, instant association of stereotypes or attitude towards particular groups without conscious awareness. And so again, I'm saying this, I am not judging you. I'm not writing down, oh, Kim said number 4 and Mark said number 1. I'm not writing that down. What I'm really doing is just assessing if the stereotypes that I believe are what other people believe. And so believe it or not, I once did this presentation without, and again, I'm just saying this because it is a stereotype, without the Asian woman on the bias slide that said, who is the bad driver? And I typically send out a feedback form, you know, for folks to say, how was the presentation? What did you learn? I got more negative feedback for not putting an Asian person on the slide that said, who was the bad driver? Now, what they were questioning was I being honest about the stereotypes that are out in the world, right? And so what I said is, well, it's a stereotype. If some people may have not heard that stereotype before, or they don't subscribe to that stereotype before, because, you know, there are people that say women are bad drivers or men are bad drivers. And so there's just this thing that we have in our brains. And it's this, they feel like, some people feel like, if I think that, then everyone else thinks that as well. And that really is just a bias. It doesn't make you, it does not make you a bad person. It's really about the feeling that you get. So what else do we have here? Were you able to find that video at all, Courtney?
Yes, I do. And I will share it right now if you like.
Okay, yeah. So again, there's this video, and thank you guys for doing that with me. Again, it's just, it really was to open your eyes on, you know, bias and making these pretty quick assumptions. And so again, this is a twist. I saw this video, it was years ago, but it's a twist on bias. And we hear these things all the time, but not the way that they do it. Okay, thanks, Courtney.
you're about to have your first kid. Congratulations.
Yeah. It's a girl. We're thrilled. I'm a little nervous.
Don't be. You'll do great. Although the timing is a little unfortunate.
How so?
Well, we have a new job opening coming up, and I was thinking about recommending you, but I assume you'll want to switch to part-time as a new father. Okay, let's get started.
Bill, would you mind taking notes on the whiteboard? You have the loveliest handwriting.
Okay.
Good morning. I have a meeting with Erica Martinez. Oh, hey. Oh, it's great to see you again. I've been meaning to ask you to get in touch with my assistant to reschedule that meeting from last week. Oh, by the way, I'm so sorry. Are you Nadia or Danielle's assistant?
I'm your finance manager.
Okay, folks. Big meeting is coming up tomorrow. How do you want to handle it?
I definitely think Isabel should be a part of it since she did all the analysis.
I think Maria should be there as well. It'll be a great chance for her to see what these kinds of meetings are like. Makes sense to me. But this is beginning to feel like a big group. Bill, why don't you sit this one out? And that way it'll feel like less of a crowd.
This seems really important. I'd hate to miss out on something that can have a big impact on what we're doing.
Listen, Bill, we're going to need you to be more of a team player if you're going to be successful here.
He did a surprisingly good job on the numbers for the board. It was pretty complicated and math heavy, but he seemed to get it right away.
Well, great. Sounds like some real potential there.
Yeah, but he needs to be more assertive, more forceful. Sometimes he can come off as too soft and nice.
You know, a few others have mentioned something along those lines. I think I'm going to bring it up with him.
I wouldn't do that. He can be a little emotional, and sometimes his feelings get the best of him.
I'll find a way to work it in.
Okay.
Wow. 3 men on one team. This is pretty rare.
Well, we're all just really passionate and excited about the topic.
Really? I just wouldn't have guessed you guys would be interested in working on our new perfume launch.
I thought this would be a great way to get more experience in product marketing.
Yeah, and a huge opportunity to do some really creative work.
Of course. You know, that's great. I'm glad you guys are here. Looking forward to the chit chat about the football and the sports cars and the planning meetings. Yeah, keep up the good work.
Are you okay? You seem a little stressed lately. Everything okay at home?
Actually, everything's fine. Why do you ask?
Well, it's just you seem a little disheveled lately. Normally, you're so well put together and stylish. The stress of the job starting to get to you?
Nope, just trying to stay on top of these presentation deadlines we got coming up.
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. That's a lot for you to handle on your own. If you want someone to take some of that workload off of you, Alicia works great under pressure.
Thanks for the offer. Got an email.
Hey, how you doing?
Excited about the party. Just feel bad about being so late, but I got stuck in traffic.
Oh, no worries. These office things, they never really start on time. So who are you here with?
Oh, my wife couldn't make it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just assumed that you were one of the spouses, you know.
I don't know. I work here. My wife doesn't.
Oh, that's nice.
Thank you so much, Courtney.
All right.
So the best part of showing this video is I always like to see folks' faces when they realize that it is kind of flip-flop, because if you've worked in any, especially as a woman, I can only come to you from a couple of perspectives. One of them is being a woman in the workplace, and that whole, oh, I thought you were a spouse, or I didn't realize you worked here, or oh, you had a baby and so maybe you need to go to part-time. These are things that really happen in the real world, and it's not until they say it to a man does it almost sound so foolish, but people say it all of the time. And so just if you could raise your hand, you have the little option down at the bottom. Oh, I can't see you, so I don't know if you raised your hand. I'm just going to assume everyone's raising their hands, okay? Because it is something that's happened. So if you've ever heard of one of the, oh, I can see, great, thank you. If you've ever heard or seen someone do that, raise your hand, but it wasn't towards a man, it was towards a woman. And so I just like that video again. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does. And I think it really just kind of shines a light on, you know, there are biases that people put out, like, oh, looking forward to the chit chat about football. You know, that happens to me all the time. Oh, what are we going to talk about? Dancing? Yeah, no, we're not. And so good. So I wanted to show you guys that video. This is where we are. We've unpacked really what implicit bias is. And I said in the beginning, there won't be a lot of statistics because it's not about statistics. The statistics are going to remain the same unless folks start to recognize that they have bias and then curb that bias. And so typically, during this presentation, I like to send you all into breakout rooms and talk about times that you from achieving a goal. But this time, what I'd like to do is I've pulled in two folks, and they introduced themselves briefly earlier today, but we've got Suzanne Cameron and D'Angelo Carter. They are co-chairs for the Kent Chamber of Commerce DEI committee. And so we, this year in 2021, established a brand new committee, which is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Last week was their very first and very successful event that they put on. And I wanted them to come to you today to talk about an experience with bias in either their professional background, their personal life, or in their industry. And so we'll go ahead and start with you, Suzanne. You are on mute. There you go.
When I graduated from high school, it was in the mid-60s. I lived through the civil rights movement and the enactment of the Civil Rights Act in 1968. I remember when we had segregation and discrimination wasn't against the law. I can remember the first time as a teenager watching TV and seeing someone Black in a commercial on TV and remembering that, oh my gosh, I didn't realize they weren't there until I saw them there. I remember when the discrimination laws were passed and put in place to protect women and minorities and families. In 1974, I purchased my first home and was discriminated against as a single woman. So I know that we've come a long way since then, but I believe we still have a long way to go. That's why I wanted to be a part of the DEI committee, because Kent's one of the most diverse cities we have in the nation, and we have a lot to share and be proud of. And we want to make sure that what we do have is recognized and celebrated, and that we all value our diversity. So I'm thankful to Zenobia, who stepped up and created our DEI committee for the chamber, and I'm looking forward to what it will accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. So when you said you were discriminated against in 1974 for when you purchased a home, how were you discriminated against? Because I thought there was like fair housing and things like that. So what does that mean, you were discriminated against when you went to purchase your home?
Well, originally I applied for a 95% loan, and I was told I didn't qualify for it, but wasn't told why. And then I finally was able to apply for a 20% down loan, so 80% lender fees, and was finally approved after the real estate broker who was selling me the home went to the lender and stood up for me and helped me get through the loan process. And when I went in to sign the loan papers, the gentleman was sitting behind his desk in his office, and he told me that I had to answer 3 questions before he could give me the papers to sign. So the first question he asked me was if I was pregnant. And then the second question he asked me was I planning to quit my job anytime soon? And the third question was whether or not I was going to be getting married anytime soon. So I sat there and was pretty dumbfounded by that and felt humiliated. So I gave it some thought and decided that my future was important to me. And I would swallow my pride and answer his questions so I could sign the closing papers. So I did, and I signed the closing papers and I got my house. And never had a problem after that making payments or selling the house when the time came to do that.
Yeah. Good. Well, good for you. I appreciate you sharing that story. And for me, you know, when we talk about diversity and we talk about inequities, if you remove one word, let's talk about, they said you were qualified, or you were qualified, you were not qualified, but they wouldn't tell you why. That happens in the real world all the time. Hey, let's say I want to be your teacher assistant or aide. The teacher may say, if they have bias, oh, I don't think you're ready for that. Now's not a good time, right? You're qualified or you're not qualified, but they don't tell you why you're not qualified, right? Then you said the real estate agent, advocated for you. That right there is very important in DEI. You need an advocate. When people are experiencing biases, really the only people that can pull that bias out or kind of shine a light on that are advocates, are people who say, well, what you're doing to her or him or them is incorrect. And this is why. And so they've kind of used their privilege, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, but they've used their privilege to go out on a limb for you, right? And so if that real estate agent didn't do that, then you may not have been able to close the deal. I mean, I know you personally, so I know you would have went after it, right? But you may not have been able to do that. And that's because you had an advocate when someone blocked you from an opportunity, and they put you in this marginalized category. Woman could get pregnant, may quit her job. That's a category that they put you in. And so thank you for sharing that. And the fact that you own your own real estate company now, I think did that have anything to do with it, that you wanted to make sure that really doesn't ever happen and you wanted to make some change?
Yes. And incidentally, when I got my real estate license in 1978, I went to work for that broker.
Wonderful. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that, Suzanne. D'Angelo, do you have a story about experience with a bias in your professional or personal life?
I do. So my name is D'Angelo Carter. I am the sales manager of Northwest Industrial Staffing. I am from Killeen, Texas, but I was raised up here in Tacoma, Washington. So being from the South and coming to the North is completely different. And I was also in the military for 6 years. I went to Iraq for 9 months. So when I got out the military and got, leaving Iraq, I instantly had a bias toward certain groups. So when I became sales manager at Northwest Industrial Staffing, which is located in Kent, Kent is a very diverse community. And I was seeing those particular groups come into my office each and every day, and I was having ill will about them. So I was committing bias toward those particular groups just because of what I had faced in the military. I held on to that type of hatred, which that's what it is hatred or discrimination. And my first year at Northwest Industrial Staffing was a rough year because I couldn't get past my own bias behind that. And I had to have one of those, talk to Jesus moments with my wife and just say, why do I feel this way about someone who looks like me, which has melanated skin like myself? And I said, wow, I am being biased. I am being racist. So I start giving every person that come in my office an opportunity to succeed, an opportunity to go to work, and I stop judging them from how they look, how they speak, how they're dressed, what their ethnicity is or the religious background, and I start just actually getting to know that person and seeing how or where they could fit inside the Kent community and beyond. So once I took, I actually put my blinders on and see, that there is more to this person besides what I think of them. I became a more successful person at my work, with my family, and, definitely with my career. So I was a person that was guilty of committing bias toward particular groups. And once I realized that I was doing that, I instantly made the change. It took me a year, but I've never looked back, and I'm more successful. And I appreciate going through it, because it's something that if you don't know you're being biased, then you're going to continue to do it. So once I went through it and once I realized that I was being biased, I made the change instantly. So thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. So you guys may not know this, but I didn't want to know what Suzanne or D'Angelo was going to share today, because I think it's really, awesome. I want it to be authentic and coming from them, and I don't want to lead them in a way to tell the story. And I'm just amazed at both of you. And D'Angelo, I just appreciate you being so open and honest and saying that. And it goes to show that your bias comes from your experiences, and there's nothing that you can do to help that. It's not until you begin to recognize the bias that you actually can make the change. And, I'm sure in the audience, we've got business people, we've got instructors, in your life will be easier once you start to recognize how you yourself can create a more inclusive environment, how you yourself can be an advocate, when you begin to recognize your privilege, and how you can give access to other people. I just think that it's so life-changing, and it really will lead us to a way where my daughter will not be having these same conversations and looking at the same statistics that I was looking at back when Suzanne, when all the fair housing and civil rights and all of that, where it's almost as if we're going backwards. And the purpose of this conversation really is to move forward. I know we only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to kind of buzz through these what I call just 3 things that you can do today, and then just kind of, again, get back to a baseline with all of you. So thank you very much, Suzanne and D'Angelo, for sharing that. The first thing that you can do, if you recognize that you have a bias, or you are in a group that is not disadvantaged and you have privilege, right? And so I also do want to say, when we're talking about diversity, I'm not only talking about race. Again, I get to come at things as a Black woman because that's my experience. That's what I wake up every day. But there's other things that make folks diverse, whether it's your education, your socioeconomic background, your abilities, your abilities to speak, your physical abilities, right? So if you are in that category and you feel like you can move someone forward, you need to be a sponsor. The only reason I'm here today speaking with you is because someone was a sponsor of me. And what that means is, Courtney, I really don't even know how we got connected. My assumption would be that someone that Courtney knows said that I was a great speaker, and Courtney reached out to me. I don't even know who that person is. What that means is that person was a sponsor of me. And so a sponsor really is somebody who's going to speak up for you when you are not in the room. They're going to see an opportunity for you, and they're going to present your name. So they don't have this kind of crabs in a barrel mentality. They don't want to have this, I want to keep it to myself mentality. And that's what you need to do. When you're in a boardroom or you're in a situation and someone else's bias is creeping in and it's stopping someone from being successful, your job as a sponsor is to say, you know what, D'Angelo, I just saw how you were interacting with them. I don't think that was right to do. And then you reach out to the person and say, hey, this might be a great job for you. Come back. Let's try this again, so on and so forth, right? So you're kind of putting yourself in going out on a limb. You want to also take a mental note as a sponsor of the norms that exist in your world and your ecosystem. And then you want to challenge those norms. That's what makes you a sponsor. And being a sponsor really leads to this kind of chain reaction of events for the person who typically is not included because of a bias that someone may have for them. You guys will go to a lot of these conversations, and a lot of people, and God bless them, they will have PhD after their name, or they will be doctor, right? And they've earned that, and I respect that, but it doesn't mean that the way I tell the story isn't as valid as someone who can riddle off all of the statistics that exist in this world. So be a sponsor for someone, and that's something you can do today. The next thing is increasing your awareness, right? So what you're doing today, you have shown up on your own time. You are not being paid. You are going through this training so that you can be aware of what, kind of how you're showing up in the world and how to recognize things. So that's step one, and I appreciate that. Execution. It makes no sense for you to come to these trainings and then not execute on what you learn. You want to, again, it's not about checking other people, right? I think I have this great opportunity where, and I've kind of learned how I can call people out respectfully. And that's me executing what I've learned in the DEI world. I was sitting with someone, and maybe you guys have heard this in education, and we were talking, it was a topic about education. And she said to me, I said, well, can you take a look at these documents for me? And I want you to edit these documents. And this is very important. It's going to be printed. Once I send it, it can't go back. And this person respects me. I respect them. And she said, oh, I'm going to be a grammar Nazi. And I thought, what? You can't say that. Like, I've heard that multiple times. And essentially what she means is that I'm going to go, I'm going to go overboard in checking and making sure. But I said, now, that doesn't really affect me personally, but I have to stop you here and say that's inappropriate. If we were in a situation where there are multiple people in the room, that could have offended someone. That's offensive. Let's just use a different word or expand our vocabulary. And she wasn't upset. She thought, oh my gosh, I never thought about it that way, right? And so that's execution. You hear something, you say something. Having open dialogue, be curious. Ask questions, go to trusted messengers. I will tell you that this is a very thin line because I've been there. You don't always want to go to the person in the room. So let's say you don't want to go to the Black people and be like, well, what do Black people, how are they feeling right now with, let's say, police brutality? Or how are women feeling because of the statistics showing that more women are losing their jobs and having to stay at home with their kids right now? There's research that you can do. The statistics are out there. So there's a very thin line of getting your training from trusted messengers versus going out and getting the training on your own. You don't want to drain folks that are already feeling marginalized, but you can have open dialogue with them. And again, I can't say this more. Action speaks louder than words. When someone does something wrong and you see that it's hurting someone else, you being an advocate and saying something in that moment, you are going to create a great relationship and an inclusive environment for the person who is, microaggressed against, again, another word that you can write down and look up. So actions speak louder than words. Just don't say something, you actually need to do it. The last one of the things that you can do is to create an inclusive environment. And I didn't say diversity, equity, and inclusion position. I said an inclusive environment, separate from diverse and separate from equitable. So what that means is calling out with respect. For me, and I don't know if you've ever heard this, there's a thin line between angry Black woman and calling someone out. So I kind of ride this line of respectfully telling someone that they've done something wrong. Don't be afraid. Again, take stock of your surroundings. If you're in a meeting, this happens more often than I like. You're in a meeting, I say something, D'Angelo says something, Suzanne says something, then Courtney says something. And then I go, oh, and I say the exact same thing that Suzanne says, but then everybody's like, oh, Zenobia, that's a great idea. It's someone's job to say, yeah, Zenobia, that's a great idea. That's exactly what Suzanne just said, right? That creates this inclusive environment, and it helps three people. It helps you. Now you're seen as an advocate. It helps Suzanne because she feels validated, and it helps me because it was a teachable moment, right? So an inclusive environment is not like, oh, just come in and let's have a good time. It's really about advocating for the other person so that they feel safe. Being included is about safety. That's really, it is a feeling. Inclusivity is a feeling. You can feel it in the room. It is not something like, oh, I think I'm included here. That's not how it works. It is an actual feeling. So in conclusion, we all have biases. And this is my time in the presentation where I always have everyone raise their hand. And it's almost like a AA meeting, but it's a DEI meeting. You raise your hand and you say, my name is Zenobia and I have biases. Once you do that, now your job is to go through the program and go through the steps and make sure that your biases are not what's making decisions for you, for your company, for your life, for your children, fill in the blank. Biases are unintentional and they're rapid. So again, you can make a mistake and it can come off bias. But if you're curious or you ask a question or you clarify, then that's okay. It happens to the best of us. I am almost certain in this 47 minutes that I have biased against someone or I've said something that was inappropriate. And just know that I feel good because I'm coming at it with a good heart, and it was definitely unintentional if I did. And so again, I just want to make this point for the very last time. When it is unintentional, it is a bias. When it is intentional, it is racism. Period. So the next thing is be a sponsor for someone today. If there's an opportunity, maybe something happened yesterday and you're like, now that I think about it, that wasn't right. Double back with that person and say, you know what? I don't think that was right what was said to you. You would be amazed at how that person responds to that. The other thing is be inclusive. It's a feeling. It's not a thing. It's not just a word. They actually have to feel inclusive, and be aware, be aware. Gain some awareness, whether you're talking to trusted messengers or talking to yourself, talking to yourself, doing research online, things like that. And then this is not a one size fits all. You will have to hear this multiple times in order for it to sink in. And some people don't do well with this type of setting. Some people may want to read books. Some people may want to look at the statistics. This isn't a one size fit all, and neither is a diversity, equity, and inclusion program. And then authenticity is the most important thing. If it's not authentic, please do not ask someone to clarify anything as it relates to their marginalized group. I'll say that again. It has to be authentic. You have to really want to know and not be trying to make fun, because a person on the other end understands that, right? They can feel when you're authentic. And the next thing, trusted messengers are all around you. They're everywhere. It doesn't have to be someone who has a master's degree in liberal studies or African American studies. It could just be your average person that's walking down the street. And then the last thing, DEI are separate. And, hopefully I'm not kind of beating a dead horse here, but you can be diverse. Like right now, the panel at which you all can see, which is myself, D'Angelo, Suzanne, and Courtney, we are a diverse group of people aesthetically, right? But if I don't let Suzanne talk because I just don't want to, that's not equitable. Even though we're all on the same panel, we're supposed to be giving a message, right? And then inclusive, I may give D'Angelo praise, but not give Suzanne praise, but they said the same thing. That's really not inclusive. And someone's going to walk away feeling like they weren't valued. And so you have to be very clear that, these are steps. You want to make sure that you're diverse in everything. Then you want to make sure that everyone in this diverse room has an equitable and equal shot at fill in the blank, at opportunity. And then it needs to be inclusive, meaning they can speak, and now what they have spoken will be acted upon. And so that's really what I wanted to share with you all today. We do have some hand raised, and I've just got to get back to my chat to find it. I can't get back to my chat, but that's okay. And so now is a good time. If you wanted to raise your hand or you have any questions, I am open to answering those.
So we do have the Q&A tab at the bottom, or wherever your toolbar is. So feel free to jump in there and write something. So we do have Mavornine suggested another video that she uses in her English classes. So you can check that out as well if you're interested. Awesome. We could go back to Sean's question at the beginning about unconsciousness of implicit bias being solved by scientific method. If that's something that we want to tackle, You. I'm not
We can
tackling
tackle it.
anything.
We can tackle it. Yeah, I would though. Sean said that he was going to put some more information in there. Like I get it with the Apple. Was that your was that the second piece to your question? Because I want to be able to answer it. And I don't want to assume I know what
Yeah, that was the second
you're
part of it.
asking. Yeah. Right. And so it's this. Okay. So if that's the second part, I'll read it for everyone. So his first initial question was, could the unconscious of implicit bias be solved using the reliability of the scientific method with the goal of accountability being the paramount of the validity? So for example, an apple is an apple and an orange is an orange, but a tomato is a tomato. Yes, they are all in the fruit category. For marketing purposes, tomatoes are always sold as a vegetable. So unless familiar with growing vegetables and fruit, people from all walks of life on a daily basis lose the ability of knowing and recognizing the difference and subconsciously accept a tomato as a vegetable. And that is very true. So I feel like you kind of answered your own question. And so, yes, the accountability, you have to do your research. You have to be in the know. If you don't want to accept that a tomato is a vegetable or a fruit, because I don't know which one it is, I'll have to read that again. It's a fruit, right? Oh, no. Yeah, it's a fruit. Okay. So if you don't want to believe that, then you can. But at the end of the day, when we're really talking about the effects that it has on other people, until it's an effect on someone else, I think we're okay. But I like this example because you break it down, and I'm going to take it if you allow me, Sean. Thank you very much. That is one of those things that are just generally accepted. It's generally accepted for a woman to be a receptionist. It's generally expected if your name is spelled, if your name is Zenobia, that you may have a little bit more melanin in your skin. Those are things that are just accepted because that's what the world sees, right? And so I appreciate that. But holding yourself accountable is number one. And then being a sponsor and holding other people accountable is number two. Is it Mavornine?
Mavorning.
Say it again.
Mavorning.
Mavorning. What kind of resources do you suggest for bringing this into the classes? When you say bring it into the classes, I'm not sure what you mean. Are you an instructor?
Yes, she is.
An instructor. That little exercise that I went through, I think is a really great exercise. There are tests that you can take. Harvard Institute has a great test that you can take. I normally send it as pre-work when I'm dealing with faculty. They like pre-work. Send a pre-work and they fill out this document, and it's almost is what we just did here in the presentation, but it'll tell you how biased are you, right? Me even being a female Black CEO, I am still biased towards men leading in the workplace. And it's the way that Harvard has done, well, it's Harvard, right? But the way that they've done this study is you can't really outsmart it. And so your biases are going to show up. And so that would be a great thing. I can send the link to Courtney. She can get it out to you. That would be a wonderful way to do it. And then do this exercise. And as a teacher, I was out Seattle Southside College, probably about a year ago. And someone asked almost the same question. He wanted to know, if it happens in your classroom, what do you do? Because it's a very thin line, right? You don't want to embarrass your students because they're really there to learn, but you want to hold them accountable because everyone else is, the other people, their education is at stake too. And so you have to create this environment in the very beginning that what will be tolerated and what will not be tolerated. So that way, when you have to bring it to the table, you bring it to the table. Also in the classroom, what I like to see, if you're bringing in guest speakers or you're doing PowerPoint presentations, you as a faculty member need to take stock of who is in that classroom and who is going to see that. And you want to make sure that those imagery is so important. Those images match your students. The folks that you have coming in, if you have a very diverse classroom, your speakers should be diverse. Your videos that you show should be diverse because all of these things are happening in the subconscious, right? So if you're not showing that, your students potentially are thinking, oh, there aren't any Black doctors, there aren't any Black lawyers, they aren't any all of these things, right? It's in their subconscious because they're relying on you, honestly, to show them and teach them. And so you have to take a little bit more heightened responsibility for that. So hopefully that that's good for you for some resources.
Thank you
Thank
very much.
Yeah, thank you,
And
Richard.
Mavornine, I just want to also say, I believe Michael Strayer uses some activities similar to this. So you might hit him up for his resources there. And I think he's on the call even today right now. Anyway, we are out of time, but I want to thank Zenobia and D'Angelo and Suzanne for joining us today and presenting this information, and in such a lovely interactive fashion as well. And thank you all for coming and joining us today.
Wonderful, thank you.
And you can hear me, so I'm going to clap.
Yay. Wonderful, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.